Welcome to the Superconscious Success Podcast, where Jen and her Superconscious Success family co-hosts bring you valuable content each and every week on topics relating to manifestation, spirituality, and most of all, using your superconscious to manifest success in all areas of your life. Now on to today's episode.
Hey there, Superconscious Success fam. Welcome to another episode of our co-hosted segment, Raising a Conscious Human, with my amazing friend and parenting expert, Eileen Dillon. Our intention with this segment is to help all those parents out there struggling to create an authentic connection with their children and confused by the non-stop barrage of opinions as to what makes a good parent and what doesn't. My name is Jennifer Matthews and I'm a spiritual coach, naturopath, personal trainer and a mum of two amazing teens. I've always said that my kids are my greatest teachers, and as conscious parents, we begin to recognize that we have as much to learn from our children as they do from us. Now, Eileen spent many years working as a marriage and family counselor and psychotherapist and has helped many people with almost every type of problem, and is now an international best-selling author, speaker, and expert in conscious parenting and emotional and anger mastery. Take it away, Eileen.
Thank you. And I'll just mention I have three children who are now 52, 45, and 35. And if you want to know if conscious parenting works, just watch it go into the next generation. It's just beautiful to see.
Absolutely.
So excited to have you on the program here, Lael. We are so, enthused about conscious parenting, and I've been working on it since the 70s, and especially your interest in emotional intelligence, emotional development is very close to my own heart. So Lael Stone is a parenting educator and a consultant. You're here all the way from Melbourne, Australia. You're also the host of the Aware Parenting Project and a speaker for the Resilience Project. And I might add that you've also founded a school which you run and so that you can practice what you preach. And I'm very interested to hear more about that. We're very thrilled to have you on, Lael, to discuss this topic, and let's
take it away.
Start right now. Take it away. Yeah.
Thank you for that beautiful introduction. Thank you. It's really lovely to be here.
Thanks so much for being here, Lael. We are, as Eileen said, we are passionate about emotions, and we know the impact that it can have on our children and how we respond to them as they're getting older. As I said, I've got an 18 and 20-year-old. My 18-year-old daughter, you know, she's a very emotional type, and so she's really in touch with her emotions. And so I'm looking forward to delving into how we can help as parents our children to become their fullest, to become that person that they're designed to be. So let's start off by just you telling us your story. How did you become so interested in this particular topic?
Okay, I'll give you the really short version of it, but thank you. Great question. Well, I actually started many, many years ago working in birth. So I worked as a childbirth educator and a doula, and I was just really passionate about helping families have good, positive birth experiences. You know, I from my own experience, I have three kids. They are 22, 19 and 14. And when I had my son 22 years ago, I knew nothing. I was quite a young mum and ended up having a really traumatic birth experience, which had a massive impact on my kind of beginning parts of being a mother. You know, I was really disconnected, was in shock. I probably look back and think I did have PTSD, and just trying to find my way through, you know, really without the lack of the village and the tribe, all those kind of things. And second time when I had came around to be pregnant with my daughter, and, you know, I realized I had a bit of trauma and I had to find different care and a different way of doing it. I ended up having a beautiful supported home birth with an amazing midwife and doctor. And that moment of birthing my daughter just changed my life, because I was like, wow, this is actually how you're meant to feel when you have a baby. You're not meant to feel broken and shattered and in shock. You're meant to feel like, oh my God, I am the most powerful, incredible human ever. And that was just such a beautiful gift for me to realize, wow, it can be done differently. So that's what actually got me working in birth, because my daughter's birth. And so I supported many, many families in all scenarios, birthing. And naturally, I found myself working or being drawn towards people who were having tricky experiences, whether stuff was going to go on with their babies, where there was trauma. I feel very comfortable with death, which is a really weird thing to say, but, birth and death are very similar on many levels. And so I found myself being drawn to working with people who were having tricky experiences because I felt, I could hold a space for them within that. So, that really piqued my interest and around trauma. And then when I had my third child, I ended up having quite a challenging birth experience with her. We ended up transferring to hospital, and she was born by, she was an undiagnosed breech, and she was born by emergency cesarean, and she was being resuscitated for nearly 10 minutes. And so the beginning of her journey was, again, a whole other experience into trauma and healing. And I'd worked enough in birth and for long enough to know, what had happened for both of us. We were going to need a lot of healing and a lot of holding within that. And so when she finally came through the whole journey birth experience, I stumbled across the work of Dr. Aletha Salter, where, she and her work of aware parenting, which is really about helping children, babies heal from trauma through listening to their feelings. And when I discovered her book, The Aware Baby, and started reading it, it was like, oh, this is what I've been looking for. As a mother, I was really into staying deeply attached and attuned to my children, but I just did not know what to do when they had big feelings. I just didn't know what to do when they're upset or they're angry or frustrated. I spent a lot of time trying to distract them and keep them happy, which doesn't work and just makes you resentful and exhausted. And so when I came across her work, I was like, oh, okay. Not only was this going to be a beautiful vehicle for my daughter and I to heal, but I could see how powerful it was going to be with my older children as well. So I just really started listening to feelings, using stuff like attachment play for cooperation, just a whole different look at how it could be relating to my kids. And so then, of course, when you start doing that, then all your own stuff comes up about how you were raised and your feelings. So then we had to delve into that. So I think I spent, I like learning, as you said right at the beginning, Jennifer, your biggest learning comes from parenting. I spent a really good, solid 5 or 6 years being at home with my kids, just holding space for their feelings, doing my own process work, all that kind of stuff. So then that moved me more into doing a lot more kind of trauma counseling just with families. And then, I'd run groups for people with mums coming and just listening, holding space for them. For a few years there, for about 5 years, I ended up teaching sex education to teenagers as my son started to move into the teenage years. I remember having a thought of like, gosh, I really want him to be very grounded and connected in this. And I find with my children, wherever phase they're going through, I'm like, wow, I need to know more.
That's where we learn.
That's where I end up doing. So I did that for quite a few years. And all the time I was just working with families. And then about over 4 years ago now, 4.5 years ago, one of my clients came to me and said her son was starting school. And she said, I just wish there was a school that supported children in the way we do at home, listening to feelings, not coercing them, choice and autonomy, all those kind of things. And I said, well, I don't really know of a school that exists like that. And she said, well, why don't we build one? Why don't you take everything that you know and I'll support it and I'll fund it and let's build this school. So it's not often that someone comes to you and says, here you go, I can build something that's your dream and we'll make it happen. And so that set on a whole other journey. It took us 3 years to build the school, and our school, it's called Woodline Primary, and it's in Victoria in Australia, just in a little town called Ceres. It's a beautiful farm school. And the whole philosophy of our school is based on emotional awareness. So our number one foundation piece is, do children feel emotionally safe? Our philosophy is kids can't learn if they don't feel safe. So we are all about expression of feelings and emotions. We welcome anger and tears. We're about choice and autonomy for the children. We're about helping them to learn how they learn best. My goal in starting the school was, by the time these children finish at our school, they will have such a deep, strong connection to who they are. They will know when something is up, what they need to help themselves come back into balance. They'll be able to ask for support. They also know how they learn best in the world, so they can articulate that. And they're deeply connected to who they are and the earth. That was our philosophy. So trying to fit that into a mainstream education system was tricky, right? Because in order to be a school, you have to go through all these regulations, and so look, it was a huge thing. It was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done, is building the school. And you're building it really on a belief and a vision of what you know to be true, and what is probably the opposite of what the mainstream system looks like. But it has been the most extraordinary thing I've ever done. We're a year and a half into our school now. What we see and what we witness our school is just beyond what I ever thought it could be. Have the most extraordinary team of people who take, I think, this vision and philosophy of what we built and are just running with it in the most extraordinary ways. So we created the school, which is amazing, and then people want to know more about it. And I've spent the last 2 or 3 years touring around Australia talking about resilience in children. I work with the Resilience Project's amazing organization here, and just keep talking about all this beautiful stuff. Hoping parents have tools and insights so that they can create more harmony in their families, but also allow their children to be the essence of who they're meant to be.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And
I think the key is to help our children remain the incredible human beings that they are at the moment of birth. And that's to me, that's a big part of what conscious parenting is. And I also want to comment that in my own work with emotions, it's my understanding that the first 7 years of life are the years in which we focus the most attention on emotions, and that the unexamined emotions can continue to run our lives for our whole lives unless we examine them. So I'm listening to you, Lael, and thinking, oh my gosh, here are people who are you're enabling these kids to connect with those emotions at the time that they really need to connect with them, and then to keep expressing them and examining them so that they don't have to go through traumas later.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that.
100%.
Got any comments on that?
Well, I mean, this is the work, right? Because probably like you, Eileen, or I spend a lot of my time working with adults, going back to their childhoods to unpack the stories and the traumas, to understand their imprints as to why they do what they do. So, and that is really important for us as adults. And I think I look at this generation, I often say to parents, of course, our parents were doing the best job they know how, right? But as we are kind of waking up as a consciousness, or as we are beginning to understand more, it's so important that we actually do the work so we don't then pass this on to our children. That is the powerful part of it. And then if we can also, do our own work so we're not passing on those stories, and meet our children where they are, so then they don't have as much story, because the reality is they will still have traumas and bits and pieces because we're human. But the more we can give them tools and understanding of how to navigate them within themselves, then, we can see what is possible. Now, I'm probably sure, Jennifer, you probably see that with your own children. I see that with my children as well. The emotional awareness or intelligence of what they have blows me away. I'm like, I just stuff my 14-year-old comes out with, I'm just like, yep, okay. It's really powerful. It's one of the biggest gifts you can give your children, for sure, because their sense of self and their connection to who they are is so magnificent to witness. And it's also, they live their life from that place of authenticity, not from the good boy or the good girl who's still looking outside of themselves for approval to say, am I okay and am I enough in the world?
I think that's the problem, is that we've all grown up. I mean, as you said before, we've all been brought up by different parents that have different styles of parenting. And so we were often told not to show our emotions. We were told to suppress our emotions, because it's not okay to cry. It's not okay to get angry. You get angry, somebody, a parent or an authority figure or someone tells you off for it. And so we learn to suppress those emotions as children. And so I think allowing our kids, so I've always said to my kids, you've got to feel your feelings. Okay, you've got to express it in some way, because once you've expressed it, you've acknowledged it, you're able to move through it. Now, there are the main two parenting styles. I'm so grateful that we're awakening as a consciousness, because the two main parenting styles that we knew of back in our day was the authoritarian approach or the permissive approach. And they were the two main styles. And we didn't know any better. We can't blame the parents, because it's what they were taught. Maybe it's what their parents taught them. So we've got to understand that. But now we have conscious parenting, and we have connection parenting, and we have that ability to be able to allow them to live their life as independent souls, allow them to create their own journey, allow them to figure out who they are. And this is why I love what you do so much, because you're actually allowing them to tap into that inner core of who they are, to that inner being, and saying, I'm perfect just the way I am. I'm okay just the way I am. I can be angry if I want to be angry. I can be sad if I want to be sad. And I love that. And I wish that my kids had a school like that when they went through school, because I think it would have made it a lot easier, with bullying and all that sort of stuff that goes on. So hats off to you. But can you explain to our listeners, before we get into the emotional stuff, can you explain to our listeners what the difference is, or what your definition is, of conscious parenting, and how that differs to the other styles?
Yeah, look, I kind of look at it again in a bit of a simplistic term, as I often explain it to parents. On one hand, we have, as you say, authoritarian parenting, which is usually about what I call power over parenting. So it's where we're using power with a physical force. So, unfortunately, people, still hitting and smacking and those kind of things, or it's threats and punishments, or it's rewards. It's basically like, I have the power, and when you are behaving in the way that I deem to be acceptable, I reward you, but when you don't, I withdraw my love. And so really the child is often at the mercy of, am I good enough? Am I behaving in the way that you want, according to what your map of the world should look like?
Yeah.
Now, often I find with authoritarian parenting, it comes from a place where usually the parent has great powerlessness within them. So perhaps they were raised that way, or they feel very stressed or very out of control. And so the only way they can control is to yell or to use force or to punish to get their children to cooperate. And really, when it comes to things like feelings and emotions, when a child is having some big feelings, from an authoritarian point of view, the goal in that moment is to shut it down, is to stop it, right? So we send children away.
That's the way I grew up.
Yeah.
I grew up with an authoritarian father.
Yeah, we send children to their room. We yell at them to stop. We tell them we'll give them something really to cry about. Like in the moment, it's about, this is not okay. Now, again, deep compassion to all humans, because I really do appreciate when a parent is sitting from that authoritarian place. Usually it's because their nervous system is, this is unsafe. This is not okay. I need to stop it, or I feel
there's
powerless.
a lot of fear, and there's a lot of fear in there. And I think with authoritarian parents, it's about, well, but what if something happens to my kid? What if they go down the wrong path? What if I don't control them, and then all of a sudden they're out of control?
And so I think that is, we have to understand that is the narrative that's been spoken for a really long time. My lovely co-host on, I have my podcast, the Aware Parenting Podcast, Marion Rose, talks about what she calls the disconnected domination culture, which is really true, which is basically that we live in a world where it is very much like be good and power, and we celebrate those who we deem to be successful, whether that is how much money you make or what grades you get or all those kind of things, right? So we're totally off track with what is a healthy human, really. And it comes back to, what if you're not good enough, really? And so I'm going to make you good enough because that'll be a reflection on me. So on some level, it is really, really fear driven. And so then on the other end of the scale, as you talked about, we have permissive parenting, which is really about the belief that we have to keep our children happy all the time. And so that is about doing whatever we can do as the parent to make sure they're never upset. Now, we know that actually doesn't serve the child, because children actually need boundaries and limits, and they actually need places to push up against to move some of the big feelings that are sitting there.
Yes,
so
definitely.
Often from permissive parenting, we often see children that are really often are wired and often can't sit still, and they're looking often for edges,
or boundaries. They're looking for boundaries
to push me up against. Now, really, from the parenting's point of view, in that permissive space comes from, I just want you to love me. I want you.
It's a lack of
okay.
self-love. That's
totally. So we're coming from that. If you love me, then I'll be okay, right? And so I think, again, deep compassion to parents, that a lot of the time that comes from sometimes people who've grown up with authoritarian parents say, I will never yell and be that way with my kids. And then they swing a bit too far in the other direction because boundaries or anger or feelings feel very unsafe. And so, again, it's very understandable that they move to that other place where they're like, I don't want any of that to happen. But then we're often very uncomfortable with the boundaries and the limits. And children are then going, well, who's the parent here? Because you're not setting anything for me. And they're wondering where they sit. So I guess conscious parenting sits in the middle, where we prioritize deep connection with our children. So we're deeply attuned to them, so that when they walk in the room and you can see there's something off for them, you can see they're trying to pick a fight with their sibling, or you can see that there's something going on, we want to have the thought that goes through our head of, I wonder what's happening there for them. We want to be in a curious state. And then we move in with connection, which may be, just like, hey, you doing okay, mate? Or it's a bit of playfulness, or it's just waiting to see what happens. And we understand that there is always a reason for behavior. So we understand that when, our 8-year-old is sitting there, trying to pick a fight with a 6-year-old, it's not because the 8-year-old is a bully. It's because there's something going on for the 8-year-old that's saying, hey, I feel powerless. I'm going to power over anybody I can, which means my younger brother, and I'm going to do these things. And our job in that moment is to look behind the behavior and to move into connection. Now, sometimes that looks like setting boundaries. It says, hey, I'm not willing for you to hurt your brother, but I'm here for you. And I can see that there's some big feelings, and let's go. What do we need to do to help them move? So we don't make the child wrong. And we always come from a place of understanding there is a reason, because children's natural state is to want to be in balance. A child's natural state is to want to be connected to us. It's to want to do the right thing. It's to want to cooperate. That's actually what a child naturally wants to do. But often there's a whole lot of stuff that gets in the way that stops them from doing that. And then it's our job as a conscious parent to decipher that, to be able to be curious, to be like, I wonder what's going on here. And to be able to stand centered enough in our own state that we are not reactive, that we don't start yelling or come in hard or start freaking out. Yeah, we're able to be curious and to stand there and go, I can see there's something going on here, and I'm going to meet you in that.
And this does become more difficult.
I want to put one thing. I want to put one thing in here too, which is the job. My perception in the conscious parenting that I developed and worked with is that children are teaching us as much as we teach them, maybe more, and that often they do things that may be distressing to parents in order to point out our own weak points.
Absolutely.
We need to grow. And I think we need to keep that in mind too.
Oh, 100%. And I think that's, again, part of the conscious element of being able to tune into yourself to go, I'm having a reaction here. What is this about?
Yeah.
And I always invite parents to be curious, to ask themselves, who's here right now? So when I say that, I go, is that like 5-year-old me? Or is that the 10-year-old me that gets so frustrated because my younger brother used to get all these things, and now I'm watching this sibling thing go on and it's reminding me of that, and all of a sudden I'm in this rage that I can't quite understand. And so, and one of the biggest things I often see for women is what I call mother rage, which is that, particularly if you grew up being a very good girl, which means you never got angry or got upset, and you did everything to keep everybody happy, then you become a mother and you are often thrown into this place of deep powerlessness, and you don't have the support you need, and your children aren't doing what you want them to do. And all of a sudden this rage comes up, which so many women I've spoken to go, this isn't me. I'm this really passive, peaceful person. And all of a sudden I just want to kill someone. Like, I'm so full of anger. And I'm like, yes, here is all those years of anger and rage that was never able to be expressed, that was never safe to be allowed to come out, surfacing now. And this is such a magnificent opportunity to take that somewhere else, not towards your children, but to take it somewhere else and lean into all those places where it was never safe for you to express your feelings, or it was never okay for you to get angry. And that, as you're saying, Eileen, is some of the most powerful work we can do, because as we clear and own our own stories there, then we're able to come back and be what I call spacious for our children, which means we're able to sit in our center, so that whatever they walk into the room and whatever they've got going on, we're able to be like, oh, yep, I can lean into that.
Yeah.
And I think that is the work, doing the work of our own inner parenting, so we can turn up for our children to meet them. Because our kids, as you were saying, Eileen, our kids are like, I don't want to carry your baggage, right? And so, they're walking around carrying our stories going, no, this is not mine. And they throw it back at us. And then parents get outraged that our kids are pushing back. And they're actually like, no, they're just offering you a gift.
This is your stuff. This is not my stuff. Yeah, and
Right.
I mean, it's something that I had to work through a lot as well. And because I would, if I was looking at prior to actually becoming this conscious parent that that I am now, I would probably say that I was more of a permissive parent. I was one because I'm an empath and I have a real hard time setting boundaries. Always have had. But then last year in particular, I went through a really, really deep dark night of the soul where I really reflected on my shadow side. I started to really look into what the heck is going on here, because this is just craziness. Like I was already conscious parenting, but I knew something was not